Hi, everyone. My name is Kurt Roney, and I'm a professor of management here at the Tillman School of Business at the University of Mount Olive. Welcome to this course on international business. I'm only one of the professors that will be teaching this course, but in this little video, I'm going to introduce you to the course and just summarize the scope of the course so that you know what to expect as the course unfolds. But as I say, you may complete the course with me, or you may complete it with other instructors, because the University of Mount Olive is spread all over North Carolina, and we have instructors in a number of locations who may work with you in this course. So I hope that I'll be the one that you get to know in the future, but if not, at least we've had a chance to do a little business here in this video. So with that, what I'm going to do is bring up a PowerPoint file and just go through a few points to make it easier to just sort of introduce you to the scope of what this course is all about, and make a few comments about how the course will unfold and what you'll have to work with. So pardon me for a minute while I try to bring this thing up. And with any luck, it'll be here in just a second. There it is. Let me just get going right away. At least I'll try to get going right away. Sometimes this recording system has a mind of its own. So the course is divided into four general topics, four sections, if you will. The first is on international trade and economics. And each one of these sections, I might add, is included or has in it. Usually it's about 4 chapters in your textbook. Now, in this particular section, there's also a brief video lecture by me on the statistical trends in international trade and economics. Your textbook doesn't really get into those trends very much. And of course, we have to update the trends pretty often, simply because they're changing all the time. And so if I showed you these charts from a couple of years ago, they wouldn't be current anymore. But anyway, that's the first section, and it's the general layout of international trade and economics. The second section is international finance. The third, international marketing and operations, how you actually do the business internationally, how you do business across borders, as opposed to in a single country. And finally, international strategy and enterprise growth. One of the authors of this textbook from the University of Texas is especially interested in strategy. And so there are several chapters throughout your book which talk about matters that are strategic in nature. And so what I've done is gathered them all up into a single section. And I believe there are 4 or 5 of those chapters in this section. So the little comment at the back, at the bottom of this slide sort of makes the point that I've been trying to make here. And that is that the chapters are from 1 to 15, but that's not the sequence that they are taken in this course. They're taken, the chapters are taken so that they fit in to one of these 4 general categories. So here's the first one, international trade and economics, as I mentioned earlier. And these are the subtopics, if you will. So there's an initial chapter 1, on international business and just the basic concepts of international business. And I might add that what's here on this slide actually proceeds pretty much the way the chapters appear in the book, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the second chapter is on international trade and making capital investments in foreign countries, or foreign countries making capital investments in your country. But that's foreign direct investment. The third chapter is on culture and the cultural impacts on international trade. Very important in a course like this. Next is international economics. And there's a chapter on international economics, and it's quite general. And so you can see that the next item, the very last item on the list, is that item that I mentioned a couple minutes ago on statistical trends in international economics and trade. And so there you'll see basically a collection of graphs. And I'll be the one again that will talk you through it. So you will have an opportunity to meet me again when we get to that topic, even if you're working with another instructor. So you can't get rid of me yet. I'll be around again. It's just a short lecture, but there's a lot of material in this first part of the course. And as you see in the little footnote down at the bottom, it'll take about 3 of our 8 weeks to, unless you're in a 15-week course, and it'll take more than that. But it'll take about 3 weeks in an 8-week non-traditional course to cover this material. This is the second category of material that we'll cover in the course, and it's on international finance. It includes the international monetary system, very important. You know, you got to have it in order to conduct business. You got to be able to exchange funds. Foreign exchange, in fact, and global capital markets is the next chapter that we'll look into. And as I recall, international finance is somewhere up near the front of the top of the table of contents, and international accounting is somewhere down at the bottom. It may be chapter 14 if I recall correctly. So here's an illustration where we're pulling chapters from different parts of the book in order to fit in to this category on international finance. So you really have to pay attention to which chapters we're dealing with, and that's spelled out in the Moodle shell, and it's spelled out in the syllabus where there's a schedule of each of the chapters and topics that we'll be going over in the course. So it won't be too difficult to know which chapters we're looking at any particular stage of the course. But it's worth bearing in mind that the chapters are not taken one after the other in the textbook. In an 8-week course, non-traditional course, it would take about 1 week to cover this material, and maybe a little longer simply because there are some pretty hefty, pretty meaty subjects here, but about a week. Here's the the third part of the course on international marketing and operations. I confess that this is not the most satisfactory collection of chapters and material that I would prefer in this section. It does talk about the operations of international business, exporting and importing. Those are very basic. They're often done by companies that don't have operations outside their own countries, but they have extra capacity in their manufacturing operations, perhaps. And so to fill up the operation and absorb their overhead more economically, the company will export some of its production outside its home country. If things go well, then it might decide to set up a broader distribution system and later on start to actually build manufacturing facilities in other countries. But exporting is simply exporting from the plant, your domestic plant that you already have. Importing is the reverse, of course. That's bringing things in from outside the country, perhaps for distribution. Maybe you've got a wholesaling or a sales company or a manufacturing company, and you want to supplement your product line with products that you bring in from manufacturers outside your home country. Then we shift to global marketing, and that is just what it sounds like, how we figure out how to create demand for these products that you're exporting or producing overseas. And as you can see, one of the things we don't have, one of the topics we don't have here is operating manufacturing facilities in other countries. It's just not in this textbook. There are a lot of things in this textbook that are good, that we want, and so we've chosen this textbook. Another reason you'll like it is this book is not expensive compared to your other textbooks. But I do wish there had been a chapter on management of manufacturing operations in other countries. But then we go to global sourcing, and that is to how we go about obtaining perhaps the raw material that we'll use in our domestic manufacturing, or how we might produce some of the components that we'll use. We might produce them in one country and ship them to another country where they'll be assembled into a piece of machinery. And that gets us really to the broader issue, the broader problem, which is supply chain management. And in the supply chain, at one stage of the supply chain, we'll touch on, just barely touch on, the possibility that a manufacturing operation is in that supply chain. From the very beginning, where we might design the product and then create bills of materials and figure out what components we want to make these products out of, and then global sourcing tells us how we're going to get them. Then we'll fabricate them. Then we'll figure out how to ship them all around the world. So the supply chain may get us into a little bit of manufacturing, but the supply chain basically is about how we tie all of these things together, even taking into account where our customers are located and so forth. So we'll get back into global marketing and distribution a little bit, distribution channels. And finally, and I might add, this one probably also will take about a week to cover. And so here we are in the next. So we open one section, which takes perhaps or one part of the course, which takes about 3 weeks. Then we go through 2 smaller sections, which take, give or take, about a week each. And now here we are into the last part of the course, and it takes, again, about 3 weeks. So 3, 1, 1, 3, 8 weeks. This is, and again, these chapters are spread all over the textbook. I have chosen to assemble them in one section of the course so that they feed on each other and they relate to one another better. So the first chapter that we'll look at, I'm not sure, but I think it's chapter 10, something like that. But it's on international business strategy. And then, as a result of international business strategy, you can imagine that entrepreneurship, developing new businesses, either or intrapreneurship. Intrapreneurship, of course, is starting a new business within your own corporation. Entrepreneurship means starting something fresh, altogether new. And you could do that in your own home country, but we'll be talking about doing it in other countries, which does make things a little more complicated. International expansion, perhaps I should have put it before entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is one way to expand, but there are lots of other ways to expand as well. And so we'll be talking about how to expand distribution channels and so forth in a more traditional sense. But that's also part of strategy. Our strategy usually calls for growth. And another word for growth is expansion. And so that's what we'll be talking about in this chapter. I might add that a couple of these topics are in the same chapter, so please don't be concerned that you have to read 6 chapters. I think it ends up being 5 chapters. But the next topic anyway is how to identify opportunities in foreign markets. And of course, this is real. This is part of entrepreneurship, and it certainly is part of strategy. But how do you form your strategy to grow a business internationally? Well, the first thing you'd better do is find out where the opportunities are to do that, and avoid the places that may not be so well suited to your business, or perhaps their politics or their culture or their economics aren't ready for your business. In any event, this is a really important chapter. Global innovation is a little different than entrepreneurship, because what we're talking about here is taking your product line, the kind of product that you offer, and innovating, making it different and better suited to the market that you intend to expand into. How do you do that? How do you do that innovation? And finally, and I confess this last item might have been put up there with the global operations, but this just seemed to be a little bit better place to put it. In order to implement strategy effectively, it obviously requires talented people. How do you find the talented people in different parts of the world? Do you put some of the folks from your own company domestically into these international operations, or do you locate people for those operations to manage the business locally? And then, even possibly, you might locate somebody who lives in Spain to manage a company in Greece. How do you go about finding talent around the world to manage your business, and then how do you manage those people so they stay motivated? And again, this is about a 3-week program of chapters that we'll be dealing with. And I'll add now something that may make you a little more comfortable with the course. And that is that there's a set of PowerPoint slides for every chapter. So as we open up each one of these parts of the course, each one of these 4 sections, each chapter in each section has a set of PowerPoints that you can print off and use to study for quizzes and tests. And I think they'll be real helpful to you. So a PowerPoint for every chapter, as well as that lecture on statistical trends in international economics and trade. So there's a PowerPoint for everything. And they're laid out as outlines, so you should find them useful for studying. Another thing about this course that you may find helpful is that there's a little video, sort of like this one, that goes along with each chapter and talks about what's in the PowerPoint slide, and doesn't get too deep into it, but at least mentions the main points to help you focus on what's most important. And again, if you've printed off those PowerPoint slides, you can sort of follow along, and it's just about the same as going to class. So if you will, this is a course that has been structured to meet the requirements of online education and non-traditional education, but with the videos and the PowerPoints, we hope that it will be pretty close to coming to class here at Mount Olive and attending class with us. You're still going to be on your own, of course, because if you're in a non-traditional course, because as you know, more responsibility falls on you. But I think you'll find these aids to be particularly helpful. Well, there's one more topic that we need to talk about and that I know you're interested in, and that is how your grade is computed. And it's really very simple. For each of 15 chapters, as well as that lecture on international trade and economic trends, there will be a quiz. And each of those quizzes is worth 2% of your grade, your total grade points. So 2 times 16, 15 chapters in one lecture. So 2 times 16 is 32% of your grade. A third of your grade will be based on the quizzes themselves. So it really pays you to pay attention and exert enough energy to do a good grade on the quizzes. And the only way you can do that is to really focus in on the chapters and review those PowerPoints. Then we come to tests, and there are going to be 3 tests. And basically the course is just divided into 3 parts, and you can almost imagine what they are. Part 1, that 3-week part of the course, parts 2 and 3, the 2 1-week parts, and then part 4, which is the other 3-week part. So we'll have to test for each one of those things. And again, they carry a lot of weight. Each one of those tests is worth 15% of your final grade points. So if you multiply 15 times 3, you see 45% of your grade there. And almost half, but not quite half. And then about a quarter of your grade will be based on a final examination. And the final examination will be based on the quizzes. Yeah, so the quizzes essentially are where we review the basic fundamental material of each one of these chapters in each 4 of these parts of the course. So when you want to get ready for the final exam, you go back and take a look at the quizzes and especially review the questions that you might have missed. So the quizzes sort of get it in your head initially, and by taking the quiz, you sort of got to focus on it. So then what we're going to do is we're going to draw on the questions in those quizzes, maybe change their wording a little bit. So a true-false question may be changed from true to false by changing the wording a little bit, but it'll be the same basic subject matter, and sometimes we won't even change the wording. So the method the madness is in the method rather than the method in the madness. And the intent is to have you read the material in the chapters, review the PowerPoints and the videos, take a quiz so that you begin to learn it, and then in order to prepare for the final examination, you go back over that material and you learn it even better. That's the final exam. Ladies and gentlemen, this course is designed to be passed. As you can see, you start with these quizzes. You've got PowerPoints and videos. You're only got about a third of a course that is represented by 16 different little quizzes. So you know you're gonna do all right there. And then you're going to have tests on those quizzes. That's going to lock it in your brain a little better. And then, and perhaps I didn't mention that a moment ago, but the tests will be based on the quiz questions as well. And then the final exam is going to do it again. And so by going over this same material, reinforcing it, and then reinforcing it again, our hope is that when you walk out of here, you're either bored out of your tree or through repetition, you've learned this material and as a consequence done well in the course. You can pass this course. All you got to do is keep your nose to the grindstone and pay attention to each of these chapters. On each one on its own, follow the PowerPoints and pass the quizzes and From there on, it's just a matter of studying to pass the test and ultimately the final exam. You can do this. And by the way, for what it's worth, I think international business is just about one of the most interesting parts of a business degree that you can get into, because the world, and by the way, this textbook is going to say the world isn't getting rounder. They say it's getting flatter. The world is getting flatter. That's a phrase that was used by a guy named Friedman several years ago. But what he means with that metaphor is that we're all playing pretty much on the same field. In the old days, the countries were really different and separated. But today, the world is becoming smaller. And so business is done internationally more and more and more. I've traveled pretty extensively in China and Russia and Eastern Europe and Latin America and Canada and Western Europe and so forth. And it fascinates me to see how the way business is done differs so fundamentally based upon everything from rules and regulations to culture. And at the same time, over time, how similar a whole lot of business functions have become. And for that reason, even though you may not think that your business here in the United States is unaffected by foreign commerce, it probably is, whether the material that you use to make your product is coming from other countries or whether you're exporting or manufacturing in other countries or simply competing with companies in other countries. We'll get into all of that in this course, and I hope that you find it as interesting as I do. And with that, I'll end this little video and simply tell you again that I sure hope you enjoy the course. Now what I have to do is find the control here that enables me to close this video. It's not the easiest thing for me to do. Let's see. But first I'll come back and say hello to you, and then I will stop the video. Goodbye. Have a good time in the course.